Wesalthie Hale, Ichat de Erdmine. In this video I'm not going to be speaking much in Old English. This video is instead about some things you should keep in mind when learning a dead language, specifically the need for self-correction. I'm primarily interested in talking about Old English, but what I say applies to learning any language without a living native speaker base. Think Latin, Ancient Greek, Biblical Hebrew, Classical Chinese, any of these. What I say will apply more or less to those as well. So let's think about what learning a language is about. You learn words and grammar, you read things. If you're learning a living language, you listen to things, you write and you say things, and if you make mistakes, you get corrected on what you say. Now when you look at a living language, that correction comes from native speakers, normally. For example, if I in my college level Spanish say, Yo estoy yendo a la tienda porque hube olvidado de comprar leche, a Spanish speaker would be able to tell me that I've made some errors. I've used the pluscuamperfect, or the past perfect, where the simple past or present perfect would have sufficed. I've added an unnecessary de in the phrase olvidar de comprar. They might also tell me that I don't need the yo at the front because Spanish only uses explicit pronouns for emphasis. These are errors that someone with a decent but not infallible grasp of Spanish, such as myself, might make. These are not easy errors like forgetting what gender la casa is. Feminine, obviously. Now, if I translate the sentence back to English, you can sort of see what kind of level of Spanish I'm talking about. I myself am going to the store because I had forgotten for buying milk. So learning a dead language is just like learning a living language. There's the same grammatical pitfalls. After all, humans spoke these dead languages. But there's no more native speakers. While certainly other, more advanced learners of a dead language might exist than yourself, they're still learners, they're not native speakers. They possibly have their own, deeply seated, incorrect beliefs about the grammar of the dead language. So what you end up having to do, and what, of course, even what I have to end up doing, because obviously I'm also a learner, we're all learners, what we all end up having to do is learn to correct ourselves against the closest thing we have to native speakers, and that is the texts that the native speakers wrote down, in our case 1,000 years ago. Self-correction of your output in Old English is essential to learning the master the grammar. Your writing will include errors, it's a given. Maybe you won't be certain whether a verb takes one case or the other. For example, the word verjutan, to forget. You might think, what case does verjutan take? And the answer actually is the genitive, so ich vergete thine, I forget you. Maybe you won't remember which of several meanings of a modern English word an Old English word tracks to. For example, the word for, it has several meanings, and maybe you're not sure whether the word for in Old English means for in a certain sentence, so you have to check that. Maybe you'll forget what preposition you have to use with a verb, or none at all. You should check against actual sentences in the corpus using whatever resources you have. If you're in college or university, see if your library gives you access to the corpus from the Dictionary of Old English. If you don't have access to the full corpus, read the example sentences under the word in the Bosworth and Toller Dictionary. Hell, use Bosworth even if you do have access to the corpus, because Bosworth translates the sentences. Which is, that's useful. The corpus, obviously, is untranslated. It's meant for textual analysis. Whenever you write something and you're not sure of whether you wrote something right, or even if you're only somewhat sure, go and look for that in the corpus. Do not rely on what feels right. English and Old English are two totally different languages, despite the fact that we call one old the other. And of course, read. Read in Old English. Read the period texts. Reading the period texts, rather than just checking individual sentences, will give you a feel for how the language sounds. Overall, you just have to remember, learning a dead language is just as much of a commitment as learning a living language. And even harder sometimes, because it requires that self-discipline to know to correct yourself. You have to be the one telling yourself you've done something wrong. assume that you won't write everything perfectly. Be ready to do that hunting to make sure that you wrote something right. And remember, with time you will feel unsure of less and less of what you write if you continuously and consciously self-correct your output. Because with time, structures, definitions, and meanings you didn't know about will get cemented in your head, just like learning a living language. And don't feel like you can't ask another learner or a teaching material, but the only true authority on writing in Old English is the text. So keep that in mind. This has been English mit Edwin, and thank you for watching.